We're going to be back again here at allpointstv.com and getting the late start because we had a few glitches in the system, but we have technicians here that can work it out. These people should be working for some of the national networks because they're pretty good in terms of working with the technology. And I have to admit that I'm not a tech guy. If I don't admit that, I'm being dishonest. I just come here and sit in the chair. They do all the work. We're here now, and we are going to be here for the next hour. And we want you to tell your friends about the program and get them to watch it once in a while and tune us in. Maybe they can add something to the content. We had some people last week. We had one person call in last week. I was very much amazed. I'm always amazed by people that call in and they have some information that's not widely known in the public domain. And for them to say the things they're saying. Last week we had a person call in and he was aware that we were talking about the Kennedy assassination because I think they're getting ready to uh, publicize, let us have access to the last of the documents that have been kept for the last 62 years. And they're saying they're going to open up everything now and let the public have access to all the records. Last week, a person called in and he was saying that, in Dallas, on that day in which Kennedy was assassinated, George Herbert Walker Bush was in Dallas, and he made mention of the fact that he later on became director of the CIA and so on and so forth. I don't think there's any connection between him being there and the assassination of John F. Kennedy, but there was certainly some rumors going around that something of major import was going to be happening in Dallas, and that's why so many of them were there. So many prominent figures were there. Richard Nixon was in Dallas on that date, and George Herbert Walker Bush would later on become the CIA director in 1976, and later on the vice president under Ronald Reagan in 80, and later on ran for president his own right in 88, and then got thrown out when he told us to read his lips. And whenever a politician tells you to read his lips, look out because that could be dynamite for the politician. You start reading their lips and paying attention to what they're saying, and that could create some problems. Anyway, he ran on his own, ran with Reagan in 80. If you want to read something very, very, very interesting, by the way, about the election of 1980 and that which came out of a lot of things were happening in that time period. One of the things that happened was the ouster of Richard Nixon in 1974. And Reagan, there's a good book you need to read. You could read. It's written by Carl Oglesby, Oglesby, and Oglesby has a book out called The Yankee Cowboy War. That's a very good book. It's not a scholarly book, but it has some very good tidbits of what was going on during this time period. Because a lot of things were happening back in the 60s and 70s, and we're now just catching up to some of the meanings of these things that were happening back in that time period. I think a lot of us are going to be very surprised to find out some things that were happening. We know a lot of it now, but I think a lot of us are going to be very surprised to find out some of the things that were going on in Dallas. I don't think that we have the. I don't even think that we're going to have the full story once they reveal the latest of those files. But we know a lot now, more than we knew back in that time period. I know I do, because I was believing everything they were putting out there. You tell me that the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court is over the Warren Commission and they are doing an investigation of what happened in Dallas, and they have these prominent figures on there. Let me see. Last week I was saying I was going to name them. I never got around to it. They got them from different corners of power in the United States. And if you put these persons up there, Sherman Cooper, that was the senator from Kentucky at that time. You had Warren G. Hardin. You had Earl Warren. I'm saying Warren G. Hardin. You had Earl Warren, who was the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, that came in after Vincent had died, and then they brought him in from California. Warren had been the governor of California, and they brought him in, and he became the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, and would be there when they are. After Vincent died, the Brown ruling was already on its way to the culmination point of the Supreme Court, and when Vincent died, then it gave an opportunity for the court to rule unanimously in Brown versus Board of Education. I don't think they would have had a unanimous ruling if Vincent had been there, because Vincent controlled another wing of the court. And this tells you again about the politics that goes on in the Supreme Court. They make political decisions, not necessarily legal decisions or constitutional decisions. And this was one of those political decisions that the court makes. They make a lot of political decisions. And they came out later on in '54 with the Brown ruling, and it was 9-0. But I don't think it would have been 9-0 if Vincent had been the Chief Justice. Anyway, Earl Warren will come up to the helm and become the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. And back when Vincent died, that's when the Associate Justice Felix Frankfurter said, until Vincent died, he didn't have any faith that there was a God. But after Vincent died, he believed there was a God after all, because Frankfurter, one of the liberals on the court, was an adversary of Vincent, who was the conservative on the court at that time. And so a lot of things going on during this time period. On the Warren Commission, I was going to name the ones that were there, because they brought them in from all these places where people had. We looked at them as having integrity, and we hadn't talked about any DEI at that point. So everyone was looked at as being legitimate, had merit and integrity, honesty, and all the rest of it. And so when they set up the Warren Commission to head off, as it now is known, what they were doing was heading off any of these Johnny-come-latelys coming out here to do their own research, and then maybe finding something very different. And what they were doing by appointing a commission, the government appointing its own commission, it heads off into these other things that might have targeted a different area and come up with a different conclusion. But on that committee, there were 7 members of that committee, and let's see, Earl Warren was one, the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. Sherman Cooper, who was a senator from Kentucky, was on the Warren Commission. That's 2. They had Gerald Ford, a member of the House, a representative. They had Senator Richard Russell from Georgia. He was on that commission. Let's see, they had John J. McCloy. John J. McCloy was from Wall Street. You see, they have all these persons that were coming from different arenas of power in the country, and every base was in fact covered. The House of Representatives, the Senate, Wall Street, the Supreme Court. What else would have had to been covered? Oh yeah, the intelligence community. That would be, and this is a very interesting one here. Alan Dulles. People need to go read these books. There's some good books out on the Dulles brothers. John Foster Dulles was the uh, Secretary of State under Dwight D. Eisenhower, and his brother, Allen Dulles, was a former director of the CIA. So they had the intelligence community as part of the investigative team. I think I've named them all, haven't I? Let's see. Am I missing anybody? I think that's Cooper, Warren G. Hardin, McCloy, Gerald Ford, Senator Russell. I think I've named them all. But my point is that you can see what this committee was about, because bringing them from all of the areas of the government, and all of them were looked at as being solid, citizens at this time. We were kind of staring at this point in this country. And I know the question, what the government was in fact saying, that was almost like it was unheard of. We were not doing that at that time. And I think that's when we started to question, after the report came out, we began to question the government. I think from that point forward, we stopped believing almost everything the government is telling us. But that was not the case back in 1963. And that committee was very impressive. I don't think I left anybody. I'm trying to think if I left anybody out of that committee. I don't think I missed anybody here. If I'll continue to think about it as the program goes on. But the Warren Commission report came out in 1964, and the first book I read, and I read pretty much all the books they put out there on the big event. I think that's why Bush is there. I think the word was out in the circles of where government was matriculating, and people were, you hear something, but you know the meaning of it. And I think the word was out that something was getting ready to happen in Dallas, and there were a lot of people that were there. I think because they heard that there was something going to happen in Dallas. So there was a big event, but I don't think any of them had an idea what that big event was. And I think when it happened, people were very surprised by it. Not the ones that were the planners in it, but the ones that were there, having heard the rumors. And I think that the assassination would have been shocking to Nixon, to George Herbert Walker Bush, and so on, because you have to be inside of the different beltways where this is being discussed and this is being planned. I don't think that even Eisenhower would have been aware. I think he was taken off guard by it also. Eisenhower had been the president before John F. Kennedy. Eisenhower had been elected president in 1952, and ran again in 1956. And it's in that second administration of Dwight D. Eisenhower where the planning of the invasion of Cuba was going on, because Fidel Castro had come out of those mountains and had come down to seize power from Batista in Cuba, and didn't let on at the time that the CIA and others were sponsoring him, because he hid his communist connection. And I think that when he came down and seized power, and of course the CIA was backing him, and so on and so forth. But then when that occurred in '59, the CIA realized it's been duped, and now we got a problem, because this man is identifying himself as a communist, and he's over there playing footsie with the Russians. And Khrushchev is the premier of Russia at this time. And we have a Cold War going on, and there's a lot of belligerence going on between Russia and the United States. The Soviet bloc, the communist bloc, and which would be later on Warsaw and NATO, and then have these military alliances. This is creating a lot of problems. And that 90 miles away from the shores of the United States was causing a problem because we had the Monroe Doctrine still extant in the politics of the Western Hemisphere, and it has not been repudiated yet. We can see some examples of the Monroe Doctrine still applicable, because look what Donald Trump did last week before last, when he was talking about changing the Gulf of Mexico and renaming the Gulf of America. Not necessarily after the United States, but the idea is that to superimpose the name of the Gulf based on our idea and not the idea that's already in place. And that's the Monroe Doctrine again, because we claim hegemony in 1823, when the fifth president of the United States, James Monroe, issued the Monroe Doctrine. Comes out of the claim that this is our sphere of influence, to the exclusion of all the countries in other parts of the world. They are not to come over and involve themselves in the inner workings of the politics of the states in the Western Hemisphere. And that still is applicable even now, but it was really bad during the time of the Cold War. During the Eisenhower administration, they had incubated the idea that Cuba was a problem that close to the United States. And plans were in the works to eliminate Fidel Castro. You know, I have to tell you something. I've lost a lot of confidence in this guy that used to be on Fox, Glenn Beck. I'm losing a lot of confidence when you tell me things I know not to be true, and I know that you don't believe. He was saying that he could not believe that, he does not believe that the CIA would be involved in the assassination of John F. Kennedy. He doesn't believe that. Glenn Beck was saying that he was when he felt some pressure, he was saying he wanted people to know he was not suicidal. He's not gonna. There's no possibility of him falling out of a window. He was just simply saying that if any of these stories come up that he shot himself in the head on the left side of the head, and being right-handed, you got to put your hand back there this way and twist it around the back of your head. He was saying that I want people to know I'm not suicidal. So for him to be saying, as he said the other day, because they're getting ready to release these files on John F. Kennedy, for him to be saying that he doesn't believe the CIA was involved in it, I want to tell you right now, Glenn Beck does not believe that. You have to almost be a nitwit that has not done any of the study on this event to say that, because this hit would not have gone down. I'm telling you I'm telling you the truth here. This hit would not have gone down unless it had been planned by a combination of forces. One force was in the intelligence community. The other force was another party that had lost out because of the takeover of Cuba by Fidel Castro, and that was the mafia, who was running casinos down there, prostitution rings down there, drug ring down there, and also a place for the elite in America to go there and have their parties without getting caught. Rockefeller could go down there, for example. These person like to go down there and have a party and come back here and put the shirt and tie on and present themselves to be respectable. Something like what the Muslims do. The Quran is the virtuous nature of their faith, but then they bring these prostitutes over on these planes and things like that, and then they can go and be this person over here in this environment, another person, another environment. And that's how they do it. I mean, the elite have money, they have power, and they want to be on a free playing field without any consequences. So when Fidel Castro came out of those mountains in Cuba and came down and overthrew Batista's government, a whole lot of things began to be shaken up because of that. A lot of different interests had. There were a community of interest that they had, and that community of interest tied a lot of people together in alliance with each other. There's no doubt about the alliance between the CIA and the mafia, because they could use each other, because each of them had a vested interest in what had occurred in Cuba. The mafia had lost out because that was a drug ring, a prostitution ring, the gambling ring, the casinos were down there making millions and millions of dollars, and all that was overthrown by Fidel Castro. And the CIA is jumping at the bits because they had been manipulated and used, and all of a sudden here's a communist 90 miles off the coast of the United States, and they can't let that stand. So Eisenhower began to plan during the Eisenhower administration to go into Cuba, and in what would later on become known as the Bay of Pigs invasion. And where does this invasion come from? It comes from Miami, because if you read the book written by Frantz Fanon called "A Dying Colonialism," you'll read in that book where Fidel Castro told all those fat cats who were living off the fatted land before he took over power. This middle class they had there, the ones that were a middle class because they were handling the gambling casinos, the prostitution rings, and things of that sort. He told them when he took over power, all that is ended, and if you don't want to work, go to Miami. And if you read "A Dying Colonialism" by Frantz Fanon, you'll read a very, very, very good book, by the way, if you want to do some very good reading about some background things that are going on here. Fidel Castro told them, if you don't want to work, then leave. And that's when the middle class, I think it's the first time this has occurred in history, where the whole middle class got on a plane and left the country. They went to Miami, and they're there chopping at the bits because they don't want to have left all that treasure there in the hands of Fidel Castro. They want to go back in there and live off the fatted calf again, as they were doing before Fidel Castro took over in 1959. And they're not accepting that they've been overthrown, that those casinos are no longer theirs. And all that money they were making, that's the people in Cuba and their alliance with the mob and so on. These ties, the politics creates strange bedfellows. And the commonality of interests, the mafia and this other mafia, the kindergartners, that's the mafia, and then the varsity mafia, that's the government, the intelligence community. The mafia are lightweights compared to the government. Both of them got mobs. You couldn't have told me that in 1963, but I know this case very well. I started looking at it back in that time period after I finally saw some discrepancies that I just could not conjure the discrepancies, this one with that one, and I couldn't see how that could conjugate because there was so much disparaging information that this cannot be if that is true. And I kept looking at all these anomalies that they were showing, and the thing that really got me was when they were saying that a bullet did all this flip flopping and jumping around like it was doing. I had taken physics in high school, like every student had done. You have to take physics before you graduate. I was not going to buy that a bullet could do the things they said that one bullet did. And when they started telling me that a bullet did all that flip flopping up and down and changing its course, stopping it, gravity stopping the bullet in midstream, and then changing its direction and going a 45-degree angle this way and diving down into Conley's body, and had to be suspended in animation for uh, a millisecond and just stop and then proceed to hit Connolly. And I'm just looking at this, and I seen the assassination of the assassin, the so-called assassin. I couldn't believe that we would be so risque with the person who had assassinated the president and then bring him down there and everybody's out there in the lobby. I tell you what really got me, and nobody's ever said this before. I tell you what really got me. I looked at how those persons were dressed when they brought Oswald down. They're gonna bring a armored truck for him to be taken from the jail, and you're gonna bring him down the basement and back it up in there. A big armored truck like you have the Brinks trucks going to the banks and that. You're gonna bring that big truck down there and so on and so forth. So you're really concerned about the someone taking a shot at a man whom they accused of killing the president of the United States, and you have all those persons in that lobby. That lobby is full of people, and you're gonna bring a truck down there because you're concerned about the welfare of the person who's accused of killing the president. But you bring the truck down there that invalidates the idea of your concern, because if you're concerned, nobody's down there. That's what I'm only 18 years old at this point. I'm starry-eyed, but I'm not stupid. That didn't make any sense. The armored truck shows that you are concerned about the safety and the well-being of Lee Harvey Oswald, and put him in a Mack truck, and then you got all this activity going on in the basement. Everybody's down there. I tell you what really got me. Nobody said this before. I'm telling you this. This is what really triggered my interest. I'm watching the uh, this unfold on television because everybody's glued to the television set at this point. I tell you what really got me. James Lavelle. James Lavelle was the detective that was handcuffed to Lee Harvey Oswald. Now, with all these people in that basement, you had no problem identifying where Oswald was when he came down that elevator into that area, because the person he was handcuffed to was dressed differently than all the rest of them. Has anyone picked that out? Jim Lavelle was wearing a white suit. Look at all the rest of them in that basement. Mary Mack wasn't the only one dressed in black. They were all dressed in black. The men in black. James Lavelle, handcuffed to Oswald, is wearing a white suit. And Jack Ruby, who was in Dealey Plaza, didn't do any shooting in Dealey Plaza, but was there in Dealey Plaza. The one that shot Lee Harvey Oswald, who was supposed to have been killed, by the way, Oswald was supposed to have been killed on his way to meet his controller. Because when Oswald left the depository building in Dallas, the school book depository building, not that he had done any shooting. I know for a fact, because I read the Paraffin report. Oswald didn't go home and take a shower and you have to put the way you get that paraffin out of your pores net, you use some hot wax and you peel that off to get that paraffin. Because if you fire a rifle, you have some residue on your face. And Oswald was checked for paraffin, and the only place where it had any nitrate on his body was in his hands. And that came from the fact that I know where that came from too. That came from them going to the firing range and working on this one guy he's with, working on the scopes of the weapons that are going to be used. Not that Oswald is aware necessarily of that, but there's a person there. James Files was his name. Where they went out and made sure the weaponry was working correctly. The fireball that was used, that last shot that was that hit Kennedy from the grassy knoll was shot from a 222. It was more than a 22. It was a 222 because they had reinforced the barrel of that weapon. It was a very new weapon at that point, and had not been given out to the public, but the CIA had it. And that fireball was that was one of the weapons that was in fact tested and so on. That's the weapon that was used in the grassy knoll. There were probably, as I watched over and over again, I kept slowing it down and showing it again, and starting again, going back, and someone found out at what point can I detect Kennedy being hit coming from behind the Stemmon sign. There's a big sign there going as you're going west on Elm Street, but you pass the school book depository. But Kennedy's been hit 2 or 3 times. Kennedy's been hit 2 times already. He was hit 1 time, and this is a shot from the front. This is a fact. And you see Kennedy coming from that Stemmon sign. I'm just trying to see at what point is Kennedy hit coming from behind that sign, because the Stemmon sign, when he comes behind that Stemmon sign, that's just the sign that's showing that the Stemmons Freeway, and they're just giving directions there on that sign. When he comes behind that sign, that has they don't I think they probably don't have that way they had it then. They got what that sign was doing was just simply saying the Stemmons Freeway, blah blah, and giving you direction, just pointing. You know how they point to the exit lanes and things of that sort. And it was just saying that was just announcing, where they were at that point. You see that everywhere you go. You see signs that will tell you where to turn off and things like that. When he comes behind that sign, and I'm trying to slow that film down so I can see at what point, because it goes behind that sign, you can't see behind that sign. When it comes behind that sign, Kennedy has been hit in the throat from the front. And I know it's from the front because the doctors that, in fact, at Parkland Hospital, they're trying to save the president. The president's already dead, by the way. But, it's the president of the United States, and you cannot accept that the president's gone unless you do everything to try to revive the president of the United States. It's good that they didn't do it, by the way, because you can't have that kind of damage. It would have been bad. In fact, nobody can survive what had happened to Kennedy, because Kennedy was hit 4 times. I'm telling you what happened, and I'm waiting to see. I'm waiting more than anyone else in the country to see the release of those documents. And I'm really worried about they have not been released yet. They've been telling us they've been going to release those documents now for 2 weeks, and they have not done it yet. I don't know why. We knew ahead of time that was a promise that Trump was going to had made, that he's going to do it this time. He didn't do it last time. He had promised, but he didn't do it. They talked him out of it, but he hasn't done it yet. And this is 2 weeks into his administration. Now he's already done the blanket pardoning of the J6 group, but has not done this yet. And I wonder. I just don't trust. I'm just be honest and just tell you, I don't trust our government. Not after what I now know. Not after all the research I've done. And I know that the shooter in the Knoll was a backup shooter, and he was not to fire he was not to fire unless those that were up that road, Elm Street, had not finished off the president, and they would know he had been finished off if there was a headshot. And the headshot, they hit him, but there was no headshot. And there's a person in the Grass Knoll area, James Files is in that area. And looking through that fireball, that telescope of that fireball has been modified. It's a modified rifle. And looking down that scope, and he's counting the shots. I mean, people can hear the shots, but he's counting it as miss, 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 because he's aware by his own testimony that they knew they were looking for a headshot, and Kennedy had not been hitting his head. So there's a shot from the front. I think that bullet goes through the windshield, because the car that the president was riding in, that car was flown to Dearborn in order to have that windshield taken out and another windshield to replace it. It's a special car, you understand, the president is riding in. It's like a rolling fort. And since it was a Ford car, they shipped it to Dearborn, to the plant there, to have it worked on in the aftermath of this assassination, because that bullet wound was a problem. Because you can tell when you shoot in the glass, you can tell by the configuration of the glass after the shot. Was it a shot going out toward the front, or was it a shot coming in from the front? And the fact is that the bullet in that windshield shows as a front shot, and that's also consistent with the doctors at Parkland Hospital that saw the president hit in the throat. He's on his back now when he gets there, and they're trying to revive him. But before they cut into his throat and did a tracheotomy, they see the wound, and these doctors are very much, if you're in Dallas, you're aware of gunshot wounds because that's just like Chicago. And they all the doctors, these are highly skilled medical officials, and every one of them testified that their shot in the president's throat was from the front. They all said that. But the president been hit in the back, in the lower, but not in the back of the neck, but down below that. And that bullet, they had to explain how the Connolly get hit within a time period of 3 shots being fired, because they already had decided ahead of time that three shots were fired. They'd already decided that. And that's why the person in the grassy knoll was not supposed to do any firing unless they had not finished Kennedy off prior to getting to where they were, where that killer was in the grassy knoll. But Kennedy had not been hit in the head. Now, who's in that? Who's in the? I actually, I think is in the school book depository. You're not gonna like this. The person who's on the 6th floor of the school book depository is Malcolm Wallace. You're not gonna like what Stone, Oliver Stone, did in his work. The one that's an ally of Donald Trump. You're not gonna like his book. Glenn Beck not gonna like it if he's gonna stick with what he's saying about he doesn't believe that the CIA would do anything like this. This man, Glenn Beck knows. I lost respect for him. Glenn Beck didn't believe that. I lost a lot of respect for Glenn Beck. But he's doing some CYA. I understand that too. But look, don't come telling me these lies. The CIA is a murder incorporated. That agency is an agency of thugs. The Mafia CIA Link. Charles Ashman's book. Go read that book. No, there were conspirators that were conspiring for different reasons because they had different interests. But as I said, politics makes strange bedfellows. You sometimes will say, I don't know what that is about. How did that group and this group get on the same team? Well, understand how you can have contrarian interests, but the contrarian interests can present you the same target, but not for the same reason why the target is being identified as such. You can hone in on a target from different people who have different interests in the target being neutralized. And that camaraderie between the two of them, between these two agencies, the mob, the JVs, and the Vasi mob, the mob that they got a report right now, the mob that had been killing all over the world. The CIA had when you say you don't believe they would do anything like that, they killed Patrice Lumumba in 1961 when Lumumba was trying to gain had been voted the prime minister in the Congo, and he was going to nationalize those minerals in the Congo, and he was a problem in that regard. And they wanted this puppet, Maurice Deshambe, Maurice Deshambe. This was a puppet of the CIA in the Congo. They wanted have him promoted up to that level, but Lumumba was in that, had gotten popular support, and he was in that place, and the CIA put a hit on Lumumba. Somebody go read about Lumumba and what happened there. But that's what Eisenhower had warned the country about on the 17th of September, on the 17th of January, 1961. Go read that. You can read the speech that Lincoln gave. Lincoln. Why am I mentioning these names out of context here? I must not have gotten enough sleep last night preparing for this program. The on the 17th of January of 1961, Eisenhower gave his departing speech, which you know as the where he talked about the military-industrial complex. That speech was given on the 17th of January of 1961, where Eisenhower warned the country about a growing threat. It was a budging threat that was beginning to emerge. He should know. He was working with them, and the lethality of that group will be demonstrated 2 years later in Dallas. And I'll be honest with you and tell you that when this assassination occurred, I wanted to go and see what Eisenhower said. I began to put my attention on Eisenhower. I want to see what Eisenhower would say, because this subterfuge was falsehood during the Eisenhower administration, and of course the CIA was started in '47 under Harry S. Truman, and they both saw they created a monster here that had developed a life of his own. And I want to hear what Eisenhower was saying after the assassination, because I want to see what he was saying. I thought it was very interesting what he said. It was some cloaked words, but what he said was the American people are not going to be stampeded. I find it to be very interesting, because if Lee Harvey Oswald did it, and he's a single gunman, is a nut, and he assassinated the president out of the clear blue, then what is this about the American people will not be stampeded if one man is in fact involved in assassination? That in of itself is a suspicious statement. Because Eisenhower had to know that what they had unleashed caught up with John F. Kennedy in Dealey Plaza. They had to know that. This monster they had created. Now, I'm going to say this right here. I'm really am looking forward to these documents. I'm going to say some things out here in public, get in front of it. So when the information comes out, I'm going to see how close it is to what I've already put on the record. They had set this thing in motion, but then at the last minute there was a change of mind, and they wanted to call this thing off for whatever reason. And so they sent John Rosselli John Rosselli out of Chicago, sent him into Dallas to tell the team that was there to call this thing off. And it had gone down too far at this point. John Rosselli was flown in to Dallas on a match airplane. He was flown into Dallas using a CIA private plane to call this hit off, and Sam Giancana, his forces had the last word there, and they would and when they tried to call this thing off, Giancana said that He didn't care what they were saying. It's going. They were mad at Kennedy because they thought Kennedy had betrayed them in the Bay of Pigs when they invaded Cuba. They thought they had air cover protection from the Kennedy administration. They thought that was going to continue the policy under Dwight Eisenhower. The invasion of Cuba was on, and they thought that the air cover they'd been promised from the Air Force would still be on tap. And they went in there thinking they had the firepower of the government, and they went in. They invaded in the Bay of Pigs and got shot up. Fidel Castro and his troops were waiting for him. They arrested 100 of them or so, tortured them, killed some, and now the group out there, and you're going to see them again. That team that was in place, you're going to see them again, because that team is also the team. Some of them were the ones in that Watergate building. You have to do a lot of reading, connect a lot of dots. And if you want to cut to the chase if you want to cut to the chase in the latter case I'm talking about, in terms of Nixon being overthrown by the CIA, Nixon was overthrown by the CIA. And last week on Greg Kelly's program, there was a video that they showed of Richard Nixon. I had not seen it, but I had already drawn the conclusion about what happened there because I had studied this case very, very carefully too, and watched what was going on. And I didn't have all the documents that I have now, but I had some. And I had said that this was a coup d'etat. Well, last week, Greg Kelly's program on Newsmax came out, and they had a video clip of Nixon. Now, the person asking him, did he think that he'd been set up by the CIA? And Richard Nixon's comment was that he thought about that. He said that what he could not believe is that the CIA was involved, was aware of the Watergate break-in before it occurred, and did not inform him of it. That's what Nixon said. He was not informed of the break-in. And then he said this. This is the video that they showed last week on Greg Kelly's program on Newsmax. He said that two of them were working for the CIA. Two of the persons that were in that burglary were working for the CIA. And when you read the book by Russ Baker called Family of Secrets, you can see what Baker is talking about in this book. When he talked about they got in there, these were pros now. They got in there and started acting like amateurs. Taping the doors horizontally rather than taping the door vertical. If you want to tape a door so that the door won't slam or make a noise when it's closing, you don't tape the door horizontal where the tape is going around this way, across the latch that way, where part of the tape is outside. You tape it this way, so when the door closes, you can't see the taping of the as you're pushing the thing that holds that goes in that little hole of the wall part of the door. You make sure that tape cannot be shown when the door is closed. They didn't tape it that way. They taped it the other way. These are amateurs all of a sudden. I have said before in some other discussions I've given that James McCord is that person inside of the Watergate building, and James McCord set the other four up. That's a fact. They deliberately got caught in the Watergate building. It was deliberate. And Nixon was saying on that tape they did last week that it was well known. He said this on that tape. I hadn't seen that tape before, but this is part of how you can. This is part of that piece I'm talking about. He said that it was well known that I was dissatisfied, I was displeased with the CIA, and I was going to do X, Y, and Z, and with it, and so on. And here's Nixon now in '72 with a mandate similar to and greater than the mandate that Donald Trump had in the election of 2024, because Donald Trump had a mandate by the popular vote and by the Electoral College vote. That's a mandate to win the most electoral votes by far. He had 312. He had 306 electoral votes in 2016 when he won, but he had 212 after it had been pushed out of the White House because of COVID in a coup d'etat. That was a coup d'etat also. They used the COVID to cover up the theft of the election. Somebody's gonna write about this one day. Somebody's gonna write about it and say, well, that's what they talked about on that program on Flint Talk Radio. But this is what happened. I'm not saying this lightly. It takes a lot of research, a lot of reading, a lot of connecting the dots. And people are not willing to put that time into it. That's why you can tell a lot of people just anything and they believe it because they don't have the information it plays into. But not here. That burglary was in fact was a plot. H.L. Hunt was involved in it. Hunt is the CIA inside of Nixon's administration. And James McCord is one of the burglars. Let me tell you another one of the burglars. This person was in Dealey Plaza also. He was in Dealey Plaza on the 22nd. What is his name? I've got to think of his name. Very important, very important figure. I think he's one of those tramps that they arrested in Dealey Plaza. That has not gotten out to the public. There were a person inside of a railroad boxcar, and they had it made it to appear that the boxcar was locked, and therefore nobody was inside of it. But the lock was falsely. It was not really a lock on that boxcar, and they opened it up and found those tramps in there. That's why they did. Those tramps were inside there. They asked them, "What are you doing in here?" And they showed their credentials. That's another thing that shows the conspiracy, because there were a lot of persons that were flashing selected service credentials. You can go and see that in the Zapruder film, where when that shot was fired, the last shot was fired, people ran up the knoll toward that shot, and then they stopped. The reason they stopped is because somebody flashed the ID and asked them, "Where are you going? Where are you going?" And told them it would be dangerous for them to come up here. And they turned around and came back because the person flashed some credentials on them. There were a lot of persons in the Dealey Plaza that had Secret Service credentials. Those Secret Service credentials were made in Los Angeles. Everyone in that, not everyone, but I'm saying a lot of people had badges. And when you ask the security later on, you found out, was there anyone authorized to be in that area of Dealey Plaza with from the Secret Service that was part of the detail team to protect the president? And the answer is no. That's how large this conspiracy was. I said the president was shot 2 times, one from the front and one from the back. A shot was down here in the below the neckline. That's 2 shots right there. But the president had not been hit in the head. And that's what they were going for, a head shot. And those shots, although they were hitting the president's body, the person in Grandson Knoll had been told, "Don't fire." They said to him pretty much like, "Jimmy, don't fire unless you have to." James Fowles. And he reports later on he was counting the shots. He wasn't counting them as 1, 2. He's counting miss, miss, because the president had not been hitting his head. And they knew they were going for a headshot. They already planted 3 bullets on the 6th floor of the school book depository building because that's where they're getting ready to frame Lee Harvey Oswald. That was already in the works because James Fowles and Lee Harvey Oswald had the same controlling member, David Atlee. I think his name was John David Atlee. They had the same controller. And what explains Oswald leaving the school book depository in the aftermath of the assassination and then going home and changing, getting his gun and so on and so forth, and then going to the theater was to go and find out what's going on. And they had planned. They knew that he's going to go to that theater because that's where his controller was, and they're gonna kill Oswald on the way to the theater. But he didn't do the route that he took was not the route that they thought he would take. Now maybe he got suspicious. I don't know. That part is not clear. But he went a different route, and he arrived there, and then sneaked into the theater without paying. Now, a lot of police officers show up on that scene because somebody's reported someone slipped into the theater. Do you think that somebody slipping into a theater would bring about that kind of force at that theater as happened with Oswald? They already were talking about who they were looking for, a person that weighed this much, this tall, this build, and so on and so forth. They already had a description. Tell me how you have a description of anybody on that 6th floor window when no one saw the shooter up there in that window. It's not like he was standing on the street and shooting and ran, and they had a description of him. They had a description of him already. Yeah, I'm waiting for the report. I'm probably waiting for it more than most, but there are some researchers out here that can verify everything I'm saying here. Maybe not everything I'm saying, because I'm saying some things that the research has not said yet. But I think they need to go and look at a couple of things I'm talking about here today. They need to go and look at James Lavelle and why James Lavelle, the detective, is dressed differently than everyone else. He's the one that got Oswald locked down. You can when you come down the elevator, we don't know where Oswald is. He could be anywhere in that group. There's a whole lot of folks out there, but to have that white suit there, you know where he is. James Lavelle is dead now, but you cannot tell me that he's differently dressed. He's the only one that's handcuffed to Oswald, and he's differently dressed than all the rest of them. You got to go a long way to explain why he's not a man dressed in black like the rest of them are. But that's the part of it too. It was a well set up. They wanted to call it off the last minute. They changed their mind, and John Rosselli tried to get him to change their mind. The one that made it go forward and said it's going anyway was John Marcello. The one that tried to stop him was Johnny Rossetti. Johnny Rosselli was been sent there to call it off. They didn't call it off because it had gone down too far. And the only one that could have called it off at that late point would have been Sam Giancana in Chicago. And it was not called off, and that's what we're now dealing with all these years later, 62 years later. We're going to see, ladies and gentlemen, when they release the files, they got to release something. They can't go back on their word on that part. We're going to see what they release and what the document's going to say. But you have a lot of the story right now. We're going to see how much of it they're going to fill in and give us the other pieces of it. But that's pretty much what occurred. A conspiracy in Dallas that involved a number of networks, and the 35th president of the United States was in fact assassinated, the fourth president assassinated in this country, and a conspiracy rang out in Dallas on the 22nd of November. That's what occurred. Okay, I got to get out of here. Next week, I'm going to talk about the confirmation hearing, and we got to put that into a context because a lot of that is, that's not authorized by the Constitution. I'm going to read to you what the document requires. Okay, we'll do that next week. Until next week, I want you to follow your dream. If you don't follow your dream, you'll never know what's on the other side of the rainbow.